Recording in progress.
I do not have volume. One down.
That's the sound, that's not him.
Go to the fifth one up. One, two, three, one more. That's it. There you go. Okay. All right, we're all ready. I think you'll be happy to know that tonight I'm not going to be talking about my equipment or my qualifications.
Ask him. So,
Okay. I've been asked to request that anyone in the audience that you mute yourself, Zoom meeting. Mute yourself. Okay. A little fuzzy. Is that better? The other mic was better. How about this? Can you hear me? Great.
Yes.
This is a presentation about a discovery, a process of discovery that I made about 8 years ago. One of my neighbors, one of my friends, asked me to make a presentation at a group at her country club. And I said, sure. I was very honored to be able to show my photos to people who might actually like them. And I assembled about 20 photos and I looked at them and I thought, okay, these are photos that I like and I'm going to share them with this group of people. And I'll talk about how I shot the photo, where I was, what the weather was like, and so forth. And I realized that after about 10 minutes, I'd be done with my presentation and it would be pretty boring. At least for me, I thought, well, what am I doing? What is it that makes my photographs nice or good for me? So I started thinking about it. And it's been a discovery, a process for me that began 8 years ago. And in a way, I felt like Janis Joplin, when she first went up to Carnegie Hall, she looked at the crowd and said, now that I'm here, where the hell am I? I felt the same way. You know, I'm going to speak in front of a group. What is it that I do that makes my photographs interesting or makes them interesting to me? So we can begin. Hopefully this will work. And indeed. Let's see. We're having a little bit of trouble with it. All right, try that. Seems there's always technical problems. You know what? I can advance it.
You can stand if you want.
Maybe it has to be aimed at the.
there we go. That's good.
Okay. Landscape photography is a subtractive art form. In other words, as landscape photographers, we consciously select what we want to include in the images and what we wish to exclude. It's a little bit different than portraiture or food photography or other types of photography. We do so by putting our view of the world inside a frame. And it's created when we take a picture and post-process it. I'll read this, and you may not be able to see it in the back. Peanuts, one of my favorite cartoons. You've got Lucy who says, "Aren't the clouds beautiful? They look like big balls of cotton." She says, "I could just lie here all day and watch them drift by." If you could use your imagination, you can see lots of things in the cloud formations. What do you think you see, Linus? Well, those clouds up there look to me like the map of the British Honduras on the Caribbean. That cloud up there looks a little like the portrait, the profile of Thomas Eakins, the famous painter and sculptor. And that group of clouds over there gives me the impression of the stoning of Stephen. I can see the Apostle Paul standing there. That's very good. What do you see in the clouds, Charlie Brown? Well, I was going to say I saw a ducky and a horsey, but I changed my mind. Shakespeare talked about this as well. Do you see yonder cloud that's almost in the shape of a camel? By the mass, and 'tis like a camel indeed. Methinks it is like a weasel. It's backed like a weasel, or a whale, very like a whale. Leonardo da Vinci had some thoughts about this as well. If you look at any wall spotted with various stains or with a mixture of different kinds of stones, if you are about to invent some scene, you will be able to see in it a resemblance to various different landscapes adorned with mountains, rivers, rocks, trees, plains, wide valleys, and various groups of hills. You will also be able to see diverse combats and figures in quick movement and strange expressions of faces and outlandish costumes and an infinite number of things which can reduce into separate and well-conceived forms. With such walls and blends of different stones, it comes about as it does with the sound of bells. In whose clanging you may discover visual and auditory stimulus in this. And in a way, I like to think of my photography in the same way. When I create an image, I want it to sing. Now, it's kind of a weird thought, but if you've ever been in a Hobie sailboat and it's really going, all of the wires kind of zzz, and they sing. I'm going to talk about the lines of composition, and in a way, if you get them right, I think they sing. The scientific term for the recognition of familiar objects and random images, abstract things or patterns, is called pareidolia. You ever looked at a marble countertop or floor, and you imagine that you see something in it, a face or an object? It's called pareidolia. In a positive sense, it's sometimes referred to as having a good eye. Hopefully people have said that to you. You've got a good eye. Your photos are pleasant. As photographers of landscapes, we need to see the patterns in the chaos of the world so that we can create a sense of order. And consequently, we can then manipulate the way the viewer looks at the images we create. The what? Aaron Babnick is a member of a group of photographers in Oregon and Washington. They're called Photo Cascadia, fantastic landscape photographers. And she's one of the few people whom I've read about who has categorized landscape photographs with different types of patterns. calls it the plunge, simply a waterfall, water moving from the top of a cliff, an echo. Let me see if I can get this. There we go. The echo, where you've got similar patterns that are repeated. The layer cake, lines one on top of the next. And the arrow. This is a fairly common compositional technique. A lot of people who do mountain photography will get very low and have focus stacking so that they take pictures of the flowers in the foreground and the mountain or whatever it is leading up to the mountain. Sorry about that. Leading up to the mountain. She calls it the arrow. Then the hub. Perhaps you can see why it's called that. Whoop, sorry about that. The wallpaper, the mandala, that's for very close-up photography. The binary, in many, sorry about that. The binary, there are quite a few elements in the binary of colors and of lines, and also you have the simile. About 80 years ago, Edgar Payne, a painter, came up with 15 different archetypal elements of landscape painting. And I've taken this from an article by Dan Dos Santos. Dave, do you think you could slide that over just a bit so that screen will show a little bit better? There we go. There we go. Okay. Let's start off with the steelyard. Most popular form of compositional balance, a scale with two unequal masses. The fulcrum is on or near the main weight. Dimensions of foreground, mid and backgrounds can be utilized. There's a visual connection between the main and lesser weights. The balance scale, used for mountain compositions where the top reaches near the top center. Circle, best used when roughly indicated and not obvious, sometimes taking on the appearance of a rectangle or a regular opening. An S compound curve, typically suggested by a line or edge rather than a mass. For example, a river or a road. It can be also seen when a curved suggestion form in both positive and negative spaces. Point of interest often appears at or near the convergence of the beginning or the end of the main lines. The bottom, he's got some examples of them. The pyramid. Most often you see mountains represented by pyramids. The structure of the pyramid or triangle composition adds to the stability of the scene. It can be created by a line, a mass, or a sprinkling of various interests. By the way, it occurred to me that I forgot something very important about this presentation. I'm going to talk about what I found for myself. And in all the research I've done, I haven't found anything that's exactly like it. It's unique. And after you hear this and you say, well, I didn't understand it, or I didn't like it, or I'm not going to use it, it's perfectly fine. There are lots of other ways to take landscape photographs. But I think it's more important if you do what I did. Take your best photographs, the ones that you really like, and spread them out or look at them on the computer and ask yourself, what am I doing? How do my photographs make me feel? What am I doing that I think is good? And get a sense of style. And if you're not certain what it is, then maybe do some research. Maybe someone else has done it, and you might be able to fine-tune what you've done. Make it a process of self-discovery, and that's what's been happening with me. The radiating line, This composition draws attention to the point of interest. Unbroken lines are often too harsh. I'm not so sure about that. I'm going to show you some examples with a photographer who has leading lines that are not unbroken, and they work for me anyway. Broken lines, irregular, and intercepted lines are usually more subtle. The L, or rectangular, similar and compatible with the steel yard. Difficult to create a balance with just one horizontal line. The suspended steel yard, upside down version of the steel yard, where masses are placed high on the image and the foreground is simple. Three spot can be used independently or together with other formats like steel yard or pyramid. Visually, two masses don't tend to work as well as three. My wife's aunt is an interior designer, and she's always said, get three of these things and put them up on the top. Everybody's shaking their heads. Three seem to work better for some reason. Grouped mass. Unity is achieved by placing several masses in a group. This format is used most often in still life images. It is easily combined with pattern and silhouette compositions. The diagonal. The diagonal, I think, is the strongest means of directing the attention of a viewer. I use that in my compositions. Once creating a considerable slant either from the top left or bottom right or reversed, the next factor is to oppose or intercept these by other lines or masses, usually tones in opposition above and below the main line. I'm going to show you a lot of examples of how I work with that. The tunnel, I think that's self-explanatory, and the silhouette. And lastly, the pattern, similar to Aaron Babnick's couple of examples, the mandala, for example. This is Ian Plant, who happens to be online with a lot of blogs and so forth. Fabulous photography. He loves the Badlands. I was out there with Ross Hubbard a couple of months ago. Pretty fantastic place. A lot of his photography does leading lines up and into the photograph. I guess the pyramid, also the, what was it called? The one with the mountains and everything leading into it. The why. I use this example because it relates not only to music, but also to the way a conductor moves the baton, almost like a triangle. And he's painting a picture, if you will, of the music. Even if you can't hear the music, if you watch a conductor and you see how it moves, how the batons move, you get a sense of the music. And that's what I think is important in landscape photography, to move the eye of the viewer. It's a famous painting, Katushika Hokusai. It's called The Wave. And you can see that the design elements lead the viewer's eye from one point to the other. This is the world out there. Everything's in there. It's the wild blue yonder, if you will. As a landscape photographer, I look at the world and I put a frame around it. Boom. That's my photograph. Everything outside that frame doesn't belong there. These are explanations, and they're words, but I'll read them anyway. Techniques for guiding the eye in a composition. Position, placement of points of contrast, and attention on prominent visual lines. I think that's pretty important. I'll show you why as we go along. Mountain peaks, tips of trees, edges of leading lines, horizon, etc. Emphasis, created by contrasts of color, shape, texture, tone, exposure, and detail. Movement, lines, shapes, and textures carry energy and tension based on orientation, position, and nearness to other elements. Direction, attraction exerted by visual weight of surrounding objects, the shape of objects on their axis, and the visual direction of action of the subject. In the process of investigating what I was doing, I came upon a theory or a way of looking at art. It's called the harmonic armature. It's developed, or it came about as a way of adding this structure to a work of art based on another understanding called dynamic symmetry. The nice thing about the harmonic armature is that it can be moved horizontally and vertically to fit any orientation. Based on the rules of harmonic symmetry, the intersections of the harmonic armature form a pattern of intersecting lines that divide the composition into 1/3, 1/4, and 1/2. The intersecting lines also create a pattern of structural diagonal lines. All these lines can be used to guide the placement of elements within a composition to give it greater power and interest. Think back to my comment about the Hobie. When all the lines are stretched perfectly, it hums. When a guitar string is tuned or a harp is tuned, it sings. The same way that if you can get your photograph to fit in an organization, I think it sings. The harmonic armature is something that I related to. You hear, if you're the first time you come to a photography club meeting, anytime you're at a photography club meeting, and you'll hear it right now, the rule of thirds. Someone always mentions the rule of thirds and then say, no, don't worry about the rule of thirds. Well, it's here. Where these lines cross, you can draw other lines. You see where the intersections of these lines are. Lo and behold, you've got the thirds. The harmonic armature works. You can also connect other lines between those intersecting lines. I'll show you how this works in a minute. The red lines here reflect the golden ratio. Perhaps you've seen that. If you use Lightroom, you can find these crop guide overlays to crop in Lightroom and Photoshop, and I'll show you how to do that later on as well. Now, it's kind of confusing. I have a friend who looks at this and he goes, oh, no, I can't stand this. But they're imaginary lines. They're a way to help you to see how to organize what you're creating. The harmonic armature is designed for art. Why? Because as an artist, I can move a person. I can make a tree larger or smaller. How does that relate to photography? Well, this is a photograph, the name of it, Retro Futuristic Style Steampunk by Ralph Farley. The yellow lines are lines that are intersecting or part of the harmonic armature. And they kind of guide the eye and the composition. When you take away those harmonic armature lines and you leave the remaining lines, you can see the parallel lines. The parallel lines here. And diagonal lines that direct the eye to a particular spot in the image. This was taken in Yosemite. And one of the reasons that I wanted to figure out what it was I was doing was that I was doing it intuitively. I had no idea what I was doing. I just liked the way it looked. And for some reason, it was successful. I didn't have the harmonic armature in front of me when I took this photo, and I didn't crop it based upon it. It just happened. And I think that if you investigate, if you look carefully, you can see a lot of the lines work. They seem to fit. I could crop it a little bit differently, perhaps, and raise the horizon a bit more, or lower the horizon a bit more so it fits perfectly, but it doesn't have to fit perfectly. And see, a lot of these lines are similar to the way the landscape goes. This goes right here, right down, and so forth. Was taken in Chile, Argentina, National Park, Los Glaciares. I was able to drink the water directly from this. It is so crystal clear, it's amazing. Anyway, the most important thing for me is that original diagonal line from top left to bottom right. And the harmonic armature includes that. For me, in this photo, the most important thing for the eye is that swirl of the waterfall. The harmonic armature doesn't fit exactly over it. However, the line of the thirds does. If I were to crop this image so that it fits with the harmonic armature, everything would fit for me perfectly. All the lines cross at the right place. And yet, if I compare it, there's the rule of thirds line. And that's what it looks cropped for the harmonic armature. But I took it like this. And what's the difference? We read from top left to bottom right. And it's part of our culture. I think that we can't change that. We just look everything from top left to bottom right. That's the first thing we see. And when you see a work of art or a photograph, your eyes jump around hundreds of times, maybe thousands of times within a few seconds. The movement of the eye is called a saccade, S-A-C-C-A-D-E. You can't control it. Your eyes move all over the place. And the idea is to get the eyes to follow the design of your photograph and not to leave the photograph. In surveys, they found that the top left of the rule of thirds gets the most attention, and then it varies. How many of you started playing this when you were kids? What's the name of it? Pong. Dave talked about this. He called it the Zorro effect, going back and forth. Maybe we call it the Pong theory or ping pong theory. I don't know. I believe that you can create motion and energy by focusing upon primary visual lines. The primary visual lines in a photograph, to me, are the ones that start top left and go down to the bottom right, and then bounce up to the left and land somewhere near the intersection of the rule of thirds on the left-hand side. You'll see what I'm talking about. Leading lines are very important. In plants, leading lines lead you into his mountains. The imaginary leading lines, those you don't necessarily see right away, but if you can, try to locate those points along those visual lines. convergent lines, you'll see in a second, and a connection of points of contrast. When I take a photograph, I don't know why, but I see those lines. The first one's easy, top left to bottom right. I try to get the top of that mountain on the left along that intersecting line. It doesn't have to be exact, by the way. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. And then it bounces up to the left. You see that little rock there? Could be a rock. It could be the intersection of the land on the horizon. The line also follows that rock on the left. You'll notice this line leads up to here. And then from there, I believe it bounces back up to the top right of the mountain. Boom. Now where's the eye go? Straight down. Now the eye is jumping around, but it's staying within the photo. And there are hundreds of other movements that the eye make, or the eyes make, in looking at a photo. But I think if we can direct the eyes of the viewer in such a way that they're looking into it, the more it bounces around, the more the eyes see. You create parallels and triangles and convergent lines. It's kind of a simplistic thing. And once the eye moves back and forth a couple of times, the eyes start looking for other things. And it bounces back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until it sees all of the little details, until the viewer sees all the details. You want to engage the viewer. This is that same photo, but without being cropped for the harmonic armature. Instead, this is what I saw when I took the photo, using again the idea of top left to bottom right, then bouncing up and so forth. And how do you do that? Well, you got to move. You got to triangulate, move up and down, zoom in and out to get it so that the photo conforms to this viewpoint. I did. That's why I was puzzled. You know, when I first thought about it, I said, wait a minute, what am I doing here? To me, those lines are there. I see them. The line of this mountain going right up to the top here. I don't know at home if you can see this. I'm using a laser pointer, but it's the line that leads from the left center up towards the top right. It gets to this point. Now there's a contrast. The eye jumps back down again. This is a pattern in my photography. This is called, get that right, The Black Prince of Crecy by Julian Story. Using my format, top left to bottom right, go through the horse, through the Black Prince, and towards the White King. It's an allegorical work of art, and then bounces back up. Whoop. You see that it goes to the horse's head on the bottom right, through the Black Prince's foot, the hoof of the horse, and then to another contrast over here, right at about that line of thirds. Heads back up again. I don't know if you can see this here, but there are birds on the top. Black birds, maybe allegorical, the black birds are coming to represent death, what have you. But they take the eye right back down again to the king. This is a simple one called The Center Bridge in Winter by Edward Redfield. You see the lines? And I could go on for days with artwork that follows this pattern. I don't know if it was done intentionally by the artist, but I find that it's similar to what I do. So I'm going to share it here. You see the lines in the sidewalk. The next step would be that, I guess, that tripod of sticks or what have you, and the line of the roof. Back down again. And then the eye continues moving around the photo in a kind of a ping pong pattern. I love this guy, Edward Redfield. He did artwork in the Old West. Can you see the lines? It goes right through the horse. That's the prominent figure here. It's rushing towards you. It's the first thing that your eye sees, I believe. The eye bounces back up through that horse to the cow. There's a connection, or right here. Back up again. Down again. Back up again. Look at the parallels. Now the eye is moving all about, but you'll notice that, what do they call them? Equal angles or equal angles and parallels, excuse me. It works. The eye tends to follow these patterns, at least it seems to me. This one's called Summer Evening on the Skagen Southern Beach by Peter Severin Hoyer. I think you can see the lines there. Top left to bottom right goes right through the subject. It's going to bounce back up to the left where the land meets the water, and then follows right up along the shoreline to the top. The photo on the right is by Sean Bagshaw. He's also a member of the Photo Cascadia. He is also a representative for Tony Kuiper. Is there anyone out here who knows about Tony Kuiper and Photoshop stuff? Bob? Yep. It's a pretty advanced technique of using luminosity masks. And Sean Bagshaw has done a number of YouTube videos where he describes and explains that process. But you'll note in this photo that there are a lot of contrasts of bright and dark and so forth, and the bright tends to stand out. Not only is it beautiful in terms of its tone and color, but I think it's also beautiful in terms of its organization. Top left to bottom right follows that same pattern as the river. Bounce back up, hits the tree. Now where's the eye going to go? Boom, right down. And now it's going to follow the river back up again till it hits that tree. And then once again, goes up, follows that tree, comes back down again, and forms a series of parallel lines and triangles that seem to be alike. The eye likes this order. It sings. There it is. They're imaginary leading lines. They're not direct. When I get my hair cut, that's all they've got at People magazines. And every other page is a cosmetic advertisement. And again, I thought, what's going on here? Why do they have the product on the bottom right? When we read top right, top left to bottom right, that's what we see. And when we turn the page, it's the last thing we see, right? So there it is. There's your product, and it goes top left to bottom right, up again. The hand points up to the top right, goes through her mouth, and the boyfriend, whoever it is, his eyes. And then, whoop, there's another line that should be there, but it's not. Okay. But the parallel line goes from the bottle up to her eyes and then back down again on her nose and so on and so forth. It's a series of diagonal lines and triangles. This was taken up in George L. Smith State Park in Georgia. Beautiful place. It's a small little lake, and it's well run. It's very pretty, and you can go up and see in November. You can see all of the trees turning color. What's this got to do with that? Well, you notice the same movement: top left, bottom right, up to the middle, and then up towards the top, and then back down again, so that you see the product. My eyes do this. This is what I see. This is how I frame my photos. There's a movement. There's Redfield again. This is almost simple. Right through the horse's nose, up to its rump, over to the cowboy's face, back down again directly to the hoof, back up again. Again, the triangles and the parallel lines that lead the eye through that image. This is by Joe Brady. He's also another photographer who has a blog, and he does a lot of traveling. This happens to be in Ireland. That guy right in the middle there, that line crosses right through him. Then the eye goes back up again. It's going to follow the, what do they call them? The festoons, what have you, the flags. Back down again to those two girls. Donna Sutton. Where are you, Donna? There you go. I saw this. I went, oh my God, this is amazing. It's busy, right? What does the eye focus on? What do you look at? Well, you look at everything, but not at the same moment. There are thousands of little eye movements that occur as you look at this. There's a lot of stuff going on. First thing you see is that right through the head. He's getting shaved. His head's getting cut. That's what you see first. Then it bounces back up to contrast. Then again, back to the middle. Right through there, you've got the crisscross of that, of the subject. Down again. This is an amazing photo. Alan Esplin is a member of our club. I think this won photo of the year. Is that right, Dave? Anybody know that? Well, I'm asking, does anybody remember? I think this might have been the photo of the year last year. It was a winner of a competition. I know that. It's a marvelous photo. The tone, the color, it's just absolutely beautiful. Watch. That top left to bottom right crisscrosses right through that lighthouse, or the whatever it is, the base of the lighthouse. The eye jumps back up to the contrast between the land, the sky, and the sea. It's going to go right back up to the top of the lighthouse, back down again until it hits something. and then it crosses back again, and then up again. Look at those triangles. They're identical. The small one and the large one are identical. Beautiful, beautiful photograph. Here's another one. This is called Rocky Coast Storm by T. Stephen Phelan. Energy like you wouldn't believe. The eye is drawn towards the action of the waves. Back up again to where there's contrast between the waves and the water, about the 1/3 line. Back up again towards the top of that peak, and down again. It hits the clouds, the top of the contrast. Let's see. You see the contrast right here? And then it jumps back down again. Back up to the top of that peak, and you've got the parallel lines again and the triangles. This is important. When you get out in the field and you set up your tripod, and that's a good idea when you're doing landscape photography, don't set it up and go, oh, that's pretty. Walk around, bend down, the term triangulate. So you get a mountain peak and maybe you get the water. And if it doesn't fit, move around a bit. Of course, don't jump in the river that's raging in South America. That could be a real problem. When we went, I remember the workshop leader saying, you don't want to fall in there because if you do, we'll never see you again. And it really was that raging. So at the end, and I did fall off part of the cliff, and there were some really scraggly rocks, and the wind was 65-mile-an-hour gusts, and I came up to the top, and the wind knocked me over. It was really strong. You want to triangulate, change your lenses. Get a wide angle lens or zoom in and out if you have a zoom lens. Maybe get a zoom lens, a large zoom lens, and create the compression that takes the landscape in the back and moves it forward a little bit. Think of those lines. Zoom in and out. Try a different perspective. Move your vantage point. Go up, go down, go away, what have you. And intentionally crop so that the picture you took in the field can be cropped so it fits those guidelines. This was taken in Torre del Paine National Park. I call it ethereal. I used a collection of neutral density filters. I think it was 16 stops. And it was a 2.5-minute exposure. At the time, mirrorless cameras had not come out. So I was using a DSLR. And if you've ever taken long exposure photography with DSLRs, you know that the viewfinder collects light and posits it on the inside the camera. So I took 4 or 5 shots, and they're all blown out because I didn't. We're in trouble now. Would you do that? It puts the light in the back, and I didn't put my thumb over the viewfinder, or maybe even drape the lens cleaner cloth over it so that the light doesn't go in. So it took me a number of, shots before I finally figured out what I was doing wrong and came up with this. I like it. The clouds, the lenticular clouds were moving. And in a way, hope this works. It does. The mountains are spectacular, but I think in this case, the clouds are the subject, or at least they coordinate with the clouds, with the mountains. You can refine your vision using crop guide overlays. The crop guide overlays appear in both Photoshop and Lightroom. There they are. You go to the tools on the top menu, then go to the crop guide overlay. And you'll see at the second box, you have a grid, thirds, fifths, diagonal, center, triangle, golden ratio, golden spiral, and aspect ratios. I think for my purposes, I use the golden spiral, the golden ratio, the triangle, and the diagonal, and sometimes the thirds. The other ones are not that important to me. You can cycle through these by hitting the letter O. So you cycle through them when you crop. And when it comes to the diagonal and the golden spiral, you might want to change the way that they're located by hitting the O and the, what is it? The shift key. I use the diagonals here, they call it the diagonal triangle, to place the most important spots, the visual spots that I can on or near the intersections of these points. So here, the land and the lake meet, and that's where I put that. Same over here. Both of these points are fit very nicely on that line. When you're in Lightroom, you go to the crop menu or on the top, and you can produce this or that. I sometimes use the golden spiral as a means of focusing attention. And it can be switched around so that the smaller part of the spiral goes on the right or on the bottom left or the bottom right. You do so by hitting the O button and the shift key at the same time, and it will jump around. Yeah, it'll circulate. That's correct. So you can use it as a guide, if you will, for the attention of the viewer. This is all part of the harmonic armature. It's all mathematical. It's based upon the Fibonacci series. I don't know if you've heard of that. I failed math, and I got out of high school. It was the last math course I ever took, believe it or not, and thankfully. But I'm blown away by something like the Fibonacci series. If you want, go online, look it up. It's an explanation of how this mathematical perception works in art as well. The golden spiral, the golden triangle, the rule of thirds, all part of the Fibonacci series. If you look at a sunflower seed, a sunflower bud, you can see the spirals in it. Hurricanes have spirals. It's all part of the Fibonacci series. And again, it makes it's something that we like to look at. It's not jagged. It makes sense. It sings. This was in the Badlands. My photography is different than Ian Plant's. I use, my system. His uses that foreground to background lines. My lines come from the top left to the bottom right. So you take this out in the field. I moved around. I put the tripod down and I looked and I looked. And it's been said that one good way to do this is to take your cell phone and walk around with your cell phone and take some pictures. And then you can get the spot that works best for you. Or just pick up the tripod and move it around and zoom in and out. The top left to bottom right, that primary line fits along the line of that cliff. Now, I moved around so that it was there when I took the picture. I made sure that I had that primary line of interest there. And the bottom right has a contrast of color and shape. It's kind of like a catcher's mitt, if you will, for that fastball that comes in the top left. I try to get something in the bottom right that acts as a net, if you will, or a backboard, and it brings the eye back up to the middle. Again, a little bit of a contrast between the cliff here or the mountain and the flowers. And if you look at this, the flowers, you follow that, and it goes back up to the top of the cliff on the right, back down again to a little river below. And the eye continues bouncing around inside the photograph. It's taken in Snowdonia in Wales. A lot of details, very busy. Top left, bottom right, up to the center, follows up to the mountain, then back down again at the contrast of the foliage and the field, and then back up again. There's a little house there. I don't know if you can see it or not, but the eye jumps to that and then continues up to here and back down here, creating parallel lines once again. Oregon coast, the tide changes very quickly there, anywhere from 8 to 10 feet, so that you've got a lot of rocks that are uncovered and left with the residue of the water that has gone through. Again, this is very busy, but I think the eye moves in a regular pattern. Top left to bottom right, follows it up to the rocks and the water on the left-hand side. And then, where does it go? Anybody? That little cave, maybe? Boom, right up to the cave, then down again, hits the rocks. I don't know if you can see the rocks. There's that menu on the bottom there, but some people who have looked at this photo tell me that the rocks look like seals that are basking in the sunlight. It's too bad that you can't see that, but they're elongated and could be imaginary seals. And then it moves back up again. Another contrast point of light and dark, of the sea and the sky, and then it follows up to here. Again, parallel lines bouncing around from one spot to the next. The eyes jump all around. You want to control that if you can. I'm going to stop showing you the lines. I'll let you see yourself if you can. Architecture works very well for this principle. You can, make it, you can shape it in a way by moving up, down, and sideways. Your eye should move all the way around until it follows back to the bridge. How many have been to Bay Shore? There's food trucks there. There used to be across the canal from those food trucks, this shed. And I drove past it a couple of times and said, oh, that is just magnificent. I love the way it looks. And it fits. It's perfect for me. The way that the lines of the shed lend themselves to this kind of geometry. Here, right up across. Oh. Oh. Right up across, down, and then back again, and so forth. This was the Naples Pier. Hopefully they'll build it bigger and better, and we'll be able to take more photos like this. The eye wants to move, and it's good that it does. But as a photographer or as an artist, you want to control the way that the eye moves in the photo. This was taken in Northern Ireland. You know, when you're a photographer and you travel around with people, they want to make you happy. They said, just tell me where to stop. You know, you see something, let us know. So I'm, oh, geez, I want to wait for something that's really important. So I managed a 10-second photo. My wife hates it when I stop the car and jump out and take photos. She's not a photographer. So I jumped out, I ran down to the, where I could get a good purchase and took this photo. And I thought to myself, boy, oh boy, this is a Halloween house if I ever saw one. Would have been better if, when the tide came in, it would have been like in an island or something. But I came home, looked at it, and then I made it into a real Halloween house. I had fun with it. You know, it really does look like a Halloween house. Again, the lines are there. Somewhere near the, is it the Blue Ridge Mountains, the Blue Ridge Parkway in autumn. Great colors. I used the Orton effect here. If you've heard of that, it softens the leaves. They're not so sharp. I like the way it looks. And that's another thing. I create photographs for myself. And I like looking at them. I don't get bored with them. On occasion, I'll look at them later and I say, what did I do? You know, I just souped up the color too much and I got to do this again. But I like the bones of the photos. So I go back and I do it again. I like the way it sings. All of the trees, the leaves, the shadows, they all create lines, leading lines. This is easy. You stand on the overlook at the Grand Canyon and you see all of these lines of the rocks and the sediment and so forth. They're there. All you have to do is move your camera so that they fit, if you will, into that pattern. Again, it's busy. And, you know, I'm tempted now to start thinking about going towards minimalist photography. Like Alan Esplin's photograph, though, it's a minimalist image, but it still follows that pattern. So I think I'm going to start looking for those kinds of things to photograph. The Loop Road, not far from us, about maybe 40 minutes. How many of you have been to the Loop Road? Okay, a lot of you have been to the Loop Road. I was with Bob Kennedy when we took this, and I asked Larry Richardson and Phil Wheat, what is that stuff growing there? I've never seen anything like that. It turned colors and so forth. Real pretty. Larry tells me it's called bacopa. I don't know what it is. He says you can find out by smelling it. Smells like peppermint. Oh, spearmint or peppermint. Well, anyway, do you see the lines? I do. And at the bottom right, again, that menu is covering it. But on the bottom right is a triangular shaped rock that acts as that kind of a backboard for the next view up to here. See the contrast between the colors and this rock, and it bounces you back up again, down again, and so forth around the photo. It's busy, but it's organized. Okay, I took a picture of an animal. And that's the subject here, but if you look at the background, it's still got that same organization. I moved around to make sure that the background fit. And the line from here to there makes it just brings you right towards that animal. And then back again, up here, and so forth. Everything goes through these lines. Bandon Beach in Oregon. Magnificent. If you've never been out there, it's magical. And it happened to be pretty foggy, but I still used a long exposure to get the water to have that kind of a milky sense. These are the techniques that you also use to create photographs, but I think elementally, you've got to have a good composition. People have accused me of creating photos that look like paintings. And I say, thank you. I would be a painter if I could. I could follow the harmonic armature perfectly. But I can't draw a straight line. I let Photoshop do it or Lightroom do it. But I see it. That's what I want to create. I want to create paintings. This is nice because you've also got some animals here. You've got the ducks. And again, this line, and I'm using these, Bandon Beach and this one from Harns Marsh, to show you that you can also do this with panoramas. The same idea of lines leading up and across. You see the patterns of the different colors of the marsh grass. Those of you who are new to Naples may not have seen this. Some guy had a great idea of building these dome houses south of Marco Island. I think that it's called Cape Marco. Yeah, I'm sorry, Cape Romano. Thank you, Cape Romano. And he built these houses with the intent of actually living there. Sir, one house. Yeah, okay, 5 structures, 1 house. I stand corrected. And he was going to move his family there, I think. At the time, it was connected to the land. But there was an old advertisement. It was, don't fool with Mother Nature. It's not nice to fool with Mother Nature. Well, we know that pretty well down here. You try to build something near the water down here, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when and where. So this was taken about 5 years ago. As I understand it, since I haven't been down there yet, it is no more. It's gone. It's underwater. Ian?
Virginia, I think you said once upon a time that you've been inside that house when it was actually on land. Yeah.
In scuba gear? Oh, people were living. Oh, you mean when it was first built? No kidding. I didn't think they actually finished it. That's terrific. Wow. This is the old adage, you can't see the forest for the trees. I tend to like crowded landscapes. I like a lot of color and texture and lines. Again, taken in Chile, Torre del Paine National Park. And you've got perhaps the echo here or the pyramid. You know, you've got 2 triangles, one on top of the other. The lenticular clouds are remarkable if you've ever been there. Our own Everglades, half an hour from here. Same idea. I try to get the angle of the bushes to kind of capture that line and then shoot it back up again and so forth. And your eye will move again around and around, back and forth, so that it stays within the frame of the photo.
An app in Lightroom that allows you to draw those lines?
No, except you use the crop guide overlays, and it will only give you the diagonal, which is that line from the top left to the bottom right, and then the 2 that come off. And yep. You can, however, download the harmonic armature and lay it over, use it as an overlay in Photoshop. And you can stretch it so that it fits the rectangle that you've established in your photo. You can go online and do that. I'm going to give you information about that at the end here. I really like this photo because it captures a moment where night turned into day. It was just at that moment. You can see the darkness on the right and the daytime coming in on the left. And these trees and the reflection lead the eye downward. And then, of course, you come back up to the tree, and these uprights lead the eye, and back and forth again. Couldn't believe this, but the colors were just like this. If you've been, if you live in Naples or Fort Myers, this area long enough, and you go to the beach every now and then at sunset, you'll see a magnificent sunset. I think that's one of the draws to living in Naples, going to the sunset and just enjoying it. I've heard people applauding at sunsets. And this was one of those sunsets. I just happened to have two of our dear friends from up in the St. Augustine area. We were showing them around for 2 or 3 days, and I wanted to show them the big houses on Gordon Drive. And we got down there after dinner. I timed it perfectly. We ran down the beach, and I took this photo. It's great. You've got the pilings, and they're the subject, but they're not. The color, to me, is a subject, if there is such a thing. I think that's the subject of this photo. These are the credits. And if you're taking notes, I want to talk about Erin Babnick. She's got a bunch of articles that you can read about her ideas of landscape photography, and also James Kalman. He's got lots of YouTube videos where he goes with the harmonic armature and he lays it over different works of art and photography. Really very, very incredible stuff, worth reading. Let's see what else. I think that is it. That's it, folks. Any questions? I do. I play around with my images. Sometimes, yes, it does work. Yeah. When you're dealing with triangles that are similar, sometimes it will work that way. Well,